All right. Hello, everybody. We are live. I'm Matt Freedman. He is Chris Allen. And this is the Week 5 NFL Fantasy Life live stream for the next 90 minutes. We're going to try to answer within a reasonable range as many of your fantasy football questions as we can, and maybe any other questions that you have as well. Questions about life. We're exactly the two guys that you would want to ask for big life decision type of start sit situation. So anyway, Chris, how is it going, man?
I'm doing well. I mean, we've got a London game about to start here in the next 30 minutes or so. Bye weeks are kicking in. I mean, it's like this new phase of the regular season is about to start for us. It almost feels like we're not back in week 1, but it's like that new start and just trying to answer as many questions as possible. So yeah, I'm ready to dive into it, man.
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of things. I definitely have a bet on the London game under 41.5. And so if at any point, once that game kicks off, I seem distracted, it's not that I'm ignoring the questions that people are asking. It's just that I'm tracking the game and realizing that there's no chance my bet is going to cash. So that's number one. Number two, I don't think that we have all that many kind of uncertain injury situations entering the week in terms of is this guy going to be active or not? Correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like for the most part, we know who is in and who is out as we're heading towards kickoff. Correct me where I'm wrong. Am I right on that?
Yeah, you're right. I was going through some of the injury reports over Friday and some of the news bites from yesterday. And Jorge Martin and I we put together the injury report that should be live on FantasyLife.com as of right now. And it didn't seem like there was anything that would really require us to pay attention up until kickoff. Most of the big names that we thought of going into this week are going to be active or not for this week. Whether it's the David Njoku's of the world from a wide receiver standpoint, we know where Malik Neighbors is at. I mean, so pretty much all the skill position players that we're most concerned with for fantasy purposes, we have an idea of whether or not they're going to be active on our rosters today or not.
Yeah, absolutely. The only one that I was thinking was maybe kind of borderline coming out of Friday was Brian Robinson Jr., but we've gotten word that Fowler is saying that he's good to go. So yeah, you know, it seems like we have pretty good information at this point in terms of injuries. So everyone be sure to check out the rankings that we have at Fantasy Life, the free start sit tool. I cannot recommend that enough in case we don't get to any questions that you have. And then of course, check out the content that we have there as well. Chris, you do a fantastic wide receiver cornerback matchups piece each week. I have the fantasy position breakdowns that I publish each week, some player props. And then also this week, I did a futures bets article, kind of looking now that we're about a quarter of the way into the season, looking at updated projections for win totals, did 10,000 simulations, looking at how everything is going to go for the rest of the season. So, you can use that to place bets to, make Super Bowl, win conference, win division, all of that. And yes, it is a beautiful morning to be talking football. Let's get into it. Thank you for everyone who is joining us. It's going to be a lot of fun talking about this week 5 slate. All right, start 3 full PPR. Garrett Wilson, Amari Cooper, Deontay Johnson, and Brian Thomas. Some interesting names here. Amari Cooper and Deontay Johnson, guys who started the season not all that hot. Deontay Johnson, with the insertion of Andy Dalton into the starting lineup, has looked like a monster the past couple of weeks. It just feels like automatically he's a must start. Amari Cooper, he's gotten the targets. He hasn't had the production in week 3. 2 touchdowns, great performance last week. Ashish with the touchdown that was called back. But Amari Cooper with the matchup he has going against the Commanders, it feels like he is certainly in must-start territory. Brian Thomas, a lot of upside. The offense that he's in, a little less certain. Garrett Wilson, going in that game that's kicking off very soon, an alpha receiver, but not alpha production at this point. What are your thoughts on those 4 guys, and who are we cutting out of it?
For me, I at least think Brian Thomas is the one I would likely cut out of all of them. I mean, while he has been in that ascending type of role, like for the Jaguars, whether it's Trevor Lawrence and his mechanics kind of taking a step back over the last like few weeks coming into 2024, that's a potential issue. One of the things that I do look at, Chris Allen FFWX, like on social media, do look at the weather. Jacksonville is supposed to have like a little bit of rain, like in the forecast, like because like hurricane conditions, like down in the south. So that's another like slight ding against him, like for this matchup. And I just looking at the rest of the guys. I mean, yeah, Deontay Johnson has a potential like bad matchup against the perimeter corners of the Bears, but he is that team's wide receiver one. Amari Cooper has one of the better matchups going up against the Commanders secondary, but he's the team's wide receiver one. Garrett Wilson, like same thing. Brian Thomas is still working in this like the 1A, 1B type of situation with Christian Kirk. Evan Ingram is also supposed to be back. That's another injury guy that some folks had concerns about. He should be good to go for that game. So it's like there's a clear separation in terms of what the potential opportunity is going to be for the for Brian Thomas versus the rest of the pack. So that's where it's easier for me to look at Wilson, Cooper, Johnson as like one group, and then Brian Thomas is kind of like a separator out of those guys. But then out of the one, I know our start sit tool like says Deontay Johnson, but man, going up against the Commanders secondary, I'm hard pressed to kind of get away from Cooper, even though I'm not really into Watson as a quarterback player for the week, but still with the amount of air yards and targets and where Cooper plays at in the intermediate and deep parts of the field, I'd have a hard time sitting them too. So it's between Johnson and Cooper for me.
Yeah. So yeah, if we're starting three, I think very cleanly Johnson, Cooper, and Wilson. I think I have Johnson slightly ahead of Cooper if we're just thinking about which one of those we definitely want as like our number one. But yes, absolutely agree there. All right. So question from Heather Salerno: Tyrone Tracy or Trey Sermon? This is like an ultimate week 5 type of question. We're like guys that we really would not have thought of at the beginning of the season as like, oh, hey, in week 5, you're going to be making a really important decision between these two players. Of course, that's where we are. I will say I lean slightly towards Trey Sermon. He's a guy I wrote up in the Freedman's Favorites article. A lot of this is just, I believe he's going to get the workload. And he's going against a Jags defense that is not, at full strength right now. And I think this is just kind of my own personal thing. I think Flacco is actually much better for that offense than Anthony Richardson. I have Flacco as 1.7 points better against the spread versus Anthony Richardson. And you can see sort of the QB valuations that we're giving the starters versus their backups at FantasyLife in our quarterback against the spread tool. But I think Flacco kind of uplifts that entire offense. And the thing is, with no Anthony Richardson, Trey Sermon has a much cleaner path to goal line carries. Like that is like a significant thing there. And so Tyrone Tracy, nothing against him, but like there's no certainty that he ends up actually like being the lead back. Like he could end up splitting a decent number of carries with Eric Gray there. But Trey Sermon, like he's really been the only guy outside of Jonathan Taylor to get some work there. So I have Trey Sermon as the one that I would go with, but what are your thoughts here?
No, I'm with you on that call. I can see the touches condensing around a guy like Trey Sermon. I mean, not to say that Sermon's like talent like really requires it, but it's just, again, we don't see a lot of other like players like on the Colts roster that would necessitate that type of move. And where for Tyrone Tracy, like him playing behind Devin Singletary, like the most carries or most touches he's had in a single game is like what, 6 or 7. So it's not like it's not like the same as like Bucky Irving or Emmanuel Wilson or Zach Charbonnet, the guys that the RB2s with guys that like as soon as the starter goes down, we knew those touches would start to condense around those guys. And like Tracy doesn't really fit into that type of mold. And with the team calling up, was it Dante Miller, I think is the guy that pulled up off the practice squad. Not I think he was something of like a preseason like hype type of guy. Neither really project to have like the full majority of the carries. And this is also a game where, I mean, we were assuming that the Giants are going to be playing somewhat behind, like going up against the Seahawks. So I'm looking at it more from like the carries aren't really going to be there, but who's really going to emerge as like the pass catching type of option like for them, because we know Daniel Jones isn't going to have Malik Neighbors in this game. Wan'Dale Robinson is more of that short to intermediate type of player. So really, I mean, I'm not looking at either Tyrone Tracy or Dante Miller as guys that I would want to target like from a fantasy standpoint in this particular matchup, unless we knew they were going to be out there running 50-60% of the routes and getting like 6-7 targets. I would be interested, but no, just give me Trey Sermon.
Yeah, even in PPR, and Tyrone Tracy, a good pass catching back in college, that could be different in the NFL, and we haven't really seen him do it yet. And yeah, the Giants now 7-point underdogs on the road against the Seahawks. Not expecting a lot of work for Tyrone Tracy. All right, quarterback, start, sit, Kyler Murray or Geno Smith. A note, my league rewards 6 points per passing touchdown. Interesting format. And I will say, I kind of like the format of 6 points per passing touchdown, because it sort of juices the value of quarterbacks a little bit without you needing to necessarily go like super flex. So just a way of getting some more quarterback value there. All right, Kyler versus Geno. Love the matchup for Geno, but I think it's leaning towards Kyler for me in this spot. What do you think here?
Yeah, I'm with you on Kyler. I mean, the upside for Geno is that like this Seattle offense is still passing at one of the highest rates in the league, and that was the hope for Seattle with the switch to offensive coordinator Ryan Grubb, and Geno not just passing a lot, but also still being like the aggressive type of passer that we were seeing, like when he was like the comeback player of the year in 2022. So it lines up like great for a guy like DK Metcalf, a guy like JSN to like who would insert pass catcher here. The problem, like we just alluded to with them going up against the Giants, is that without Malik Neighbors, without Devin Singletary, without like enough of the weapons for the Giants that would like create this sort of back and forth type of matchup to really push them, that's where my concern would be for how many pass attempts can we really project for Geno Smith, and that's my concern. Whereas with Kyler Murray, I mean, like while the production hasn't been there, his scrambling was also down like quite a bit. And just in a matchup this past week against the Commanders, we thought he would be able to feast on. Yeah. But we're assuming that going up against the 49ers, they're gonna have to play. Like they can't just turtle up and just like say like, all right, Marvin Harrison, like, all right, well, we're not going to really try and like push things like down the field. Like I think this is going to be more of those up tempo type of matches where I would lean on a guy like Kyler Murray versus saying like, despite the fact Geno's been playing well from a fantasy standpoint, that game invites that type of like back and forth environment that we would want for fantasy production.
Yeah. So looking at the betting market, the total in the Cardinals 49ers game of 49.5 is the highest on the slate. So yeah, the possibility for a shootout there. All right, Wicks or Brian Thomas Jr. We haven't talked about Wicks yet. Really intriguing guy, because to this point in the season or prior to last week was nothing more than a rotational guy. But when he has been able to get on the field, especially for, longer chunks, he has been a productive player. I know Dwayne McFarland absolutely loves him. Yeah. And I've had this sort of like internal battle with myself throughout the week of like, okay, how high do I move him? And so Tuesday morning, when I'm getting like that first run through of ranks done, have him like in the 30s, and then like gradually throughout the week, bump him up. I updated rankings this morning. I think now he's my wide receiver 20, something like that. Where are you with Wicks and thinking about this head to head here, Wicks versus Brian Thomas Jr.?
I think I'm more aligned with you in terms of like, yeah, I can understand like having him in like the like low end wide receiver 2, high end wide receiver 3, like that type of conversation to start off the week. But now with all this drama surrounding Romeo Doubs, like also no Luke Musgrave in this matchup, it's like the options for Green Bay are condensing. And when we already saw like Wicks kind of force the issue in terms of having Jordan Love look his way primarily in like the 3/4 of last week's game when Christian Watson went out. I mean, just looking at his target share, like over 25% of the team targets, like 30% of the team's air yards. And of course, we're dealing with small samples. We completely understand that, folks. Like, again, we're only talking about like 3/4 of play. But if the guy like essentially comes off the bench, like and like on the back end of the Packers, like wide receiver rotation and turns into their wide receiver 1, I mean, that does force you to take notice. And again, in a matchup against the Rams and that secondary and how much production that they've allowed like so far over the last 2-3 weeks, I mean, it does really invite that type of ceiling that you would want, like out of a guy that you picked up off the waiver wire. So I'm not as keen on, I think our start sit tool as of right now probably grades out Thomas as the better option between the two. I would still lean for Wicks just because of the opportunity and then also the matchup that's available for Wicks in week 5.
Yeah, I think it's close between those two. If you look at our rankings, I think they're slightly leaning towards Dontayvion Wicks. I lean towards Wicks as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's got that league winning type of upside that you want from someone that you're picking up off of waiver. Like, he might be the rare wide receiver who you can get on waivers or have gotten on waivers who actually might change the course of your season. That doesn't happen at the wide receiver position all that much. Last week, season best numbers, 78-2, receiving 13 targets, 80% route rate. And the thing that's wild is he could have had an even better performance last week. He had 144 unrealized air yards, and he dropped a potential touchdown. Going against a Rams defense that is number 31 in pass DVOA, just like absolute for me, like, okay, absolute's maybe the wrong word. Highly probable must start for me. Like think about what we talked about 2 weeks ago. Now, it didn't work out when we were like, does not Khalil Shakir, it was Rashid Shaheed. Does Rashid Shaheed add joy to my life? He did not in week 3 when he got the big zero.
Right.
But like Dontayvion Wicks adds joy to my life. And maybe even more importantly, like if I don't start him and he goes off on my bench, I will absolutely hate myself more than I already do.
The opposite of joy.
Yes. So yeah, Dontayvion Wicks feels like for multiple reasons, someone I'm wanting to start. All right. After injuries and bye weeks, I need some help. This is a question from Jose Hernandez. Start 2 half PPR. Tyrone Tracy, Dowdle, Tolbert. Thanks, fellas. All the emojis. All right. This is one of those kind of nasty questions of like, yeah, I mean, this is totally like bye week and injury impacted type of question. Tyrone Tracy, we already talked a little bit about him. And then you have Dowdle and Tolbert, 2 Cowboys here, even though I'm wearing the Cowboys hat, bullish on neither of those guys. Am I? What are your thoughts on Dowdle and Tolbert? I will say, Tracy, if you're looking to start 2, Tracy feels like the automatic, like no doubt you're starting him. And then it's a question of Dowdle versus Tolbert.
I do like between the two of them. I like Dowdle, like out of those guys. If you're going to take like Tyrone Tracy, we are seeing that the flippening happening like in the backfield, like for the Dallas Cowboys. Like my only concern is like going against like the Steelers, like front, like defensive front is what that production is going to look like. But at least for Dowdle, like so far, like getting more of the high leverage type of touches that you would want from a fantasy standpoint, I could lean more towards it, like more towards Dowdle, like for week 5. Because with Tolbert, yeah, Brandon Cooks is supposed to be out with the knee infection. We could hope to see some more pass attempts like going his way. But at least for this week, if we are looking, especially in like a half point PPR, I guess I lean a bit more towards Dowdle, but interested to see, like, especially with your fandom, like if you really think like either one of the two really grade out as the better option. But I'm just looking at from a floor standpoint, Dowdle's touch projection is kind of where I'm leaning towards.
Yeah, I would definitely go with Dowdle. I'm enthusiastic about neither one, but like Dowdle at this point is presumably the RB1 in Dallas, or like very close to it. Now it's like a split backfield, but still with him. Tolbert at best in this game is the number 3 pass catching option. And that's like at absolute best. And it could be like number 4. So, the RB1 versus the wide receiver 4 or wide receiver 2, but number 3 pass catcher, like I'm not really interested. So yeah, I'm going Tracy and going Dowdle. All right. A question from Kenneth Clegg. I'm stuck deciding between Trevor Lawrence, Deshaun Watson, or Joe Flacco if he plays. Very strong assumption that Flacco does play. Anthony Richardson was downgraded to doubtful. And when a guy gets a doubtful designation, almost never does it happen that he actually plays. So we should assume Flacco is going. What do you guys think? Flacco, I wrote him up in my Freedman's Favorites piece earlier in the week under the assumption that he would be starting instead of Anthony Richardson. Deshaun Watson, also wrote him up. Chris, you mentioned earlier, not really big fans of Deshaun Watson in terms of what he's shown on the field the past few years, but he's got that matchup against the Commanders, and that feels like potentially the elixir that could cure everything, at least for 1 week. And then Trevor Lawrence, a lot of enthusiasm we would have had for him to start the year, and the matchup isn't bad, but I don't know. What are your feelings between these 3 guys?
And if I had to start one of them, I'll at least I'll lean towards like Joe Flacco just from the stable floor that he provides, and like also the potential for like the increased amount of pass attempts. Like their drop back rate, I mean, increased significantly. Like once Anthony Richardson went off the field and Joe Flacco went on the field. So if we can at least like project like more passing volume, like for the Colts, and we already know that their pass catchers are ones that we want to try and target, like whether it's Josh Downs, whether it's Michael Pittman, like whomever. I mean, that's where I lean a bit more towards like Joe Flacco. I'd probably have them ranked Flacco, Deshaun Watson, just because the matchup. I mean, how many like every single like every quarterback that they played against has almost every like has allowed like multiple passing touchdowns like to the opposing quarterback for the Commanders. It's like 4 to Baker Mayfield in week 1, 2 to Daniel Jones in week 2. I mean, like I would assume at least from that standpoint that we would want to target the quarterback playing against the Commanders. So I think that's where I'm at. It's probably Flacco 1, Deshaun Watson 2, and then Trevor Lawrence 3.
All right. So thinking about this a little bit more and looking at the rankings that I have, man, this is nasty. I have Trevor Lawrence 12, Deshaun Watson 14, Joe Flacco 15. So I have these guys bunched all together in a tier. And I would say, in terms of like vibes, I would probably want to start Flacco out of those 3, even though he's the one that I have as the lowest ranked. But if I'm just trying to think sort of like quote unquote analytically, I probably would go with Lawrence. And one thing that I would say that we can pay attention to, like the betting market on this, like, you know, like real money is actually coming to bear on the betting market, especially when we're getting to the point of like Sunday morning. Like at this point, like hundreds of thousands, in some cases, like millions of dollars are moving the lines here. And the Jags, even though they are 0-4, even though things seem to be in total disarray in Jacksonville, the spread has continued to move towards Jacksonville, to where earlier in the week, this number was Jags favored at home by 2.5. I think it's a good thing for the Colts that Flacco is the starting quarterback. Even with him as the starting quarterback, the line has continued to move towards the Jags. And so it hit the key number of 3, moved past the key number at 3.5 now. If you're looking at our FantasyLife odds page, that number is 3.5, and it has actually popped to 4 at BetMGM. So like the market, like, and as we get closer to kickoff, that is the most efficient that the market tends to be. And so if the market near kickoff is continuing to move towards the Jags, that's a pretty bullish sign. So okay. I would be going with Trevor Lawrence. That said, I will feel a little bit nasty about it just because like that Jags offense has not looked good to this point in the year. All right. For everyone joining us, thank you. We're going through as many of your fantasy football questions as we can get to, as many within reason. We're still going to have conversations. All right. Yeah. He's Chris Allen. I'm Matthew Freedman. Next question up here from Jack. What is this? Jack and Band Flyboy. All right. Xavier Worthy. Zay Flowers at the flex. We haven't talked about either of these guys yet. For me, the issue with Zay Flowers is always sort of like aesthetic of like, he, I think, is a great player who is in an offense that just wants to run the ball. Like their like platonic ideal of what they want to do is just grinding people into dust with the run game, which doesn't leave a lot of opportunity for Zay Flowers. With Xavier Worthy, you can think, hey, maybe he will actually be the number 1 wide receiver for the Chiefs going forward. That said, that's like theory. That's not something that we actually might see in reality. So even though you think Xavier Worthy might be the number 1 receiver, even though the Ravens like to run the ball, I'm still going towards Zay Flowers in this spot.
That's where I'm at. Like Zay Flowers, like right now, like sitting around like a 25% share of like the team's Baltimore's targets. And also like my Bengals in their secondary, like while everybody is probably looking at Derrick Henry to run roughshod like over the Bengals like interior defensive line, like that's where I'm thinking like most of the production is going to come, especially after watching Henry rip off 80-yard touchdown runs at 30 years of age. Like I don't think I could run that far, like even when I was 30, and I'm in my 40s now. I'd like to see Derrick Henry doing that. That's insane. But for Flowers, like specifically, it's almost like the rope-a-dope like type of technique is like if the Ravens want to sell Derrick Henry and the Bengals want to focus on the rushing production, they could just go over top of him with Zay Flowers. I mean, how many times have we seen Cam Taylor-Britt get beaten by, out and ups or just like stop and goes or whatever for long gains? And it's not just him, it's any of the rest of the remaining Bengals secondary. So with the amount of targets and this being one of the more higher projected like scoring type of like environments like on the slate for today, like I think like Zay Flowers is probably the one I would lean a bit towards more. Like Xavier Flowers, I have some hope with Rashee Rice's maybe temporary absence. I guess we'll find out more about what Rice's health status is like. I have some hope for Zay Flowers for the long-term portion, but if you're just talking about today in general, I'd lean a bit more towards Zay Flowers.
All right. So a few things. Michael Lopez telling everyone to hit that like button. Yes. Thank you, Michael Lopez, for the reminder. If I were like a good professional podcaster, like or YouTube live streamer, whatever it is, I would be reminding people, pound that like button, help us get the algo going in our favor. So Lopez, thank you for reminding all the good folks to hit the like button. Also, for people who want to throw in guesses of what I am drinking in this honeycomb mug, feel free in the comment section to take guesses. We might look at that a little bit later in the show. And then one more final thing, the rope-a-dope. Great reference there. The woman I'm dating had never heard of the phrase rope-a-dope.
What?
And I had to like try to explain it to her. And it's just like, you know what? This might not be worth. She thought I was like making it up. And I was like, no, this is a thing. This is like a like iconic moment in boxing history.
Yes.
Anyway. All right. So hat tip to you for mentioning that. That way I can be like, hey, look, this is a real thing. Someone else besides me actually said it in the normal flow of conversation. All right. Hunt or Sermon over Achane. Oh man. This is like the quintessential week 5 question of like this guy that I drafted who was awesome in weeks 1 and 2, now not doing anything for me. Do I go with these other guys who 2 weeks ago I did not even think about their existence? Where are you on Hunt or Sermon versus Achane?
I would give it to Kareem Hunt if I had to pick like one of the two. I think like Trey Sermon is interesting, but I would at least I do want to give like some deference like to the Chiefs offense. And despite the fact that it's not Patrick Mahomes like really powering this offense, and we've seen like less passing production like over the last like 3 weeks or really like throughout the start of the season. And now without Rashee Rice, there are some concerns about like how this team is going to grind out, like get more wins, but it hasn't really been much of a concern from a rushing standpoint. And with Hunt coming in and essentially like taking over the RB1 role for the Chiefs backfield, Carson Steele like fumbling away the game, CEH doubtful for week 5. If we already know that at least if we're considering the Chiefs offense as one of the better offenses in the league, I would lean a bit more towards Hunt especially over Achane. The Miami Dolphins, like they've had 3 first downs over the past couple of weeks without Tua. It's probably not good. Like at least me trying to think about it. So I would guess like if I'm gonna go from either like from Achane or Sermon, I think or Hunt, I think I'll go with the Chiefs offense for right now. But I am like somewhat concerned about how that team is going to look overall without Rashee Rice on the roster.
Yeah, I am still going with Achane. I think he's still good enough. The Dolphins actually somehow slight favorites in this game, even though they are not good. They have not looked good the past 2 weeks. And I look at this game and I think, where do points come from? Like this could be like a 17-10 type of game. I still think I have to go with Devon Achane. He is like the most talented guy, and he's on a team that is favored in this spot. I would still be going with him. All right. Should I start Stevenson or Akers as my RB2 full point PPR? Ramondre Stevenson, have minimal faith in. Actually, let me rephrase it. I have no faith in Ramondre Stevenson at this point, especially after his head coach came out and was like, yeah, we might be considering a change. Like if the coach is saying that, I feel like it's not that they're considering a change. They are like near committed to making the change, or at least to giving the other guy a real shot. And Stevenson has fumbled in 4 games straight. Like that's just like, you cannot keep your starting job while you are giving the ball away like that. Akers, good matchup. Earlier in the week, I wrote up Joe Mixon because I thought there was a good chance that he would be coming back. Mixon out. Akers should be the beneficiary of that absence. No Mixon, no Dameon Pierce. Looks like Akers has a good shot. And of course, the Texans home favorites in the spot, going against a Buffalo defense that is missing its key linebackers. Irish coffee, nice guess. No. Hot toddy. That depends on what goes into a hot toddy, but no.
What does go into a hot toddy?
A hot toddy, I think, is like a combination of tea and is it whiskey?
Yes. Hot water, whiskey, honey, and lemon.
Okay. Close. Very close. No whiskey, unfortunately. Keeping it clean on this Sunday morning.
Well, although we get drunk on camera. Like I wasn't invited to that.
Yeah, look, getting drunk. Look, it's just one hot toddy. That's not going to make enough of an impact. Although I should say, maybe in honor of the London game, which is just kicking off now.
Yes,
could have done the hot toddy, because that is very much like a sort of like London type of thing. All right, thanks for the input, fellas. Kenneth Clegg, our pleasure. All right, full PPR, Tutu or Flowers. Yeah, we talked about Zay Flowers earlier, number one wide receiver, but in a run heavy offense, versus Tutu, who is not the number one receiver, but is in an offense that is a little more friendlier to the passing game, and so wide open in terms of who is the number one wide receiver that you kind of never know. In any given game, maybe Tutu could have like 80 yards and a touchdown. I'm still leaning towards Zay Flowers in the spot, but what are your thoughts here?
I'm still leaning towards Zay Flowers. I mean, even just last week, like less than 50% of the routes, like for the Rams. I mean, while the air yards are certainly there, like over 20% of the team's air yards in back-to-back weeks, actually 30% in week 3. It's just like, well, what do you need as of right now? So actually take that back, because even if you needed ceiling, like Zay Flowers also wins in the same ways that Tutu Atwell wins. Yeah. I mean, he can still like create explosives like down the field the same way that Tutu does. So while I could see Atwell getting behind the defense and creating a long touchdown, Zay Flowers can do the same thing, but Zay Flowers also has the higher floor, like with the level of targets that he's currently getting in the offense in the short and intermediate parts of the field. So yeah, I think it's Flowers, like by a pretty decent margin.
Yeah, I agree. Going with Flowers there. All right. Another question here. Need one PPR: Eckler, Tutu Atwell, or Jordan Whittington? So the Atwell versus Whittington thing is interesting, because like Whittington, like last week, was on the field basically every snap, running all of the routes, was playing inside and outside. It feels blasphemous to be like he was playing the Cooper Kupp role, but like that's kind of a little bit of the role he was playing. And he was getting targeted. So Whittington versus Atwell, two guys on the same team, is interesting. And then Eckler, Robinson is going to go for the Commanders, but he might not be, getting his full workload. Eckler, coming off of the concussion, might be getting, in addition to his normal pass game load, maybe a little extra work as a runner. So how are you thinking all of those guys compare to each other?
Yeah, I think it's probably, I would go Eckler, Whittington, and then Atwell in that scenario, because I'm with you. I mean, like Brian Robinson, I love when players do this. Like they don't say anything or whatever. Like Robinson just tweeted like a thumbs up emoji, and that's how everybody knew he was going to play today. Like I wish I could just do that. Like no words. I'm just going to like put up an emoji, and everyone's like, oh yeah, Chris is good for this week. Like it's great. Like it would make my job so much easier if all I had to do was just tweet out an emoji. That's the way our job should be. Like any of those guys, like just thumbs up or thumbs down, just move on to the next question. But yeah, with the potential for Robinson, like aggravating the knee injury, could be like a good matchup for the to showcase some of his pass catching skills against the Browns like defensive front. I think Eckler is probably the easiest one versus trying to figure out like what role each of the Rams receivers has for week 5.
All right, so next one here, tight end matchup question from Sylvester White: David Njoku or Trey McBride? So McBride has been out for a little bit, cleared, coming back this week. Same with David Njoku, who's been out. So like two guys who have been dealing with injury issues. Trey McBride, for me, is the guy that I would probably want to go with. I think he's going to have likelier more targets coming his way anyway, but then also potential high scoring game back and forth between the 49ers and the Cardinals, and going against Hufanga, who is healthy now, presumably, but has been off and on of the injury report and like probably isn't 100%. So I like the idea of McBride going against a safety who, although like he's good when healthy, is not healthy right now. Well, where are you on this?
I'm with you. Like I while it's great to see like Njoku get back into the lineup, also going up against the Commanders, like defensive secondary, we know can give up explosive gains. I think like Trey McBride, I think it's telling when everybody kind of glommed on to Elijah Higgins, like in week 4. Higgins only got like a 7% target share, and there was like, oh yeah, so this Trey McBride guy he's actually good. Like he actually earns targets. It's not just the role that he has on the offense that allows him to get targeted week in and week out by Kyler Murray. And so, like, if we're shifting back from a 7% target share to the tight end position last week to over 20%. That's what Trey McBride was getting on a weekly basis beforehand. That's where I would probably I'll probably hang my hat on that opportunity for week 5.
All right, next question here. Sticking with the tight end position, with Kittle banged up, would you use Ferguson? A little bit of embarrassment of riches at the tight end position. Both of these guys I have ranked as top 3 tight ends this week. Only Travis Kelce ahead of them. I do have Ferguson now as my number 2 tight end. No Brandon Cooks. And I think Ferguson would be getting a lot of targets coming his way anyway. So good situation for him. And then Kittle, as you mentioned, banged up. And because the 49ers 7.5 point favorites at home in this spot, they might not need to throw the ball all that much. And especially with Debo healthy, with Ayuk healthy, with Jawan Jennings, emerging, they don't really need to throw the ball to Kittle. And so even though I have him as my number 3 tight end this week, that's more like indictment of the tight end position in general versus like a lot of overwhelming enthusiasm for Kittle. So I would lean towards Ferguson. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I'm 100%. I'm aligned with you on this one. 22 and 20% like target rate over the past 2 weeks after we missed week 2. We can see the Cowboys targets. Like it's one of the situations there, the targets Cowboys are condensing around a couple of players, where with the 49ers, to your point, like Brock Purdy has multiple players that he can pass to. So it's like, I don't think in this situation, we need to force like George Kittle into our lineup. So if you have a guy like Jake Ferguson who can earn targets, is in a relatively efficient offense, at least that we're thinking can move the ball up and down the field in week 5, I would go towards Jake Ferguson, like at least compared to George Kittle.
All right. With you there. By the way, the mug is back. So we haven't had what's in Freedman's. Oh, look at that graphic. Shout out Nando making that graphic. Lovely mug there. And even lovelier photo of me. That photo is, I'd say, at least 10 years old. But that's the one.
Where were you for that?
That's the one we're going with. That was like my professional headshot when I was still like in the professional world versus the fantasy world that I definitely inhabit now on a daily basis. So what's in Freedman's mug? Not hot toddy, not Irish coffee. That much has been established. All right. Yes. Good morning, Charbonnet or Kareem Hunt PPR. Charbonnet, not the lead back at this point anymore. Like at best, he's the change of pace. But what we've seen out of Kenneth Walker recently, the explosiveness that he's shown and the way that they've used him, there's almost no need for Charbonnet within that offense. Whereas like Kareem Hunt, I think he's going to be the leader in the Chiefs backfield. I am pretty cleanly going towards Kareem Hunt in this spot. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm leaning towards like Kareem Hunt as well. The only thing that I will say is that one, Kenneth Walker, not to say he popped up on the injury report, but he was limited in practice. There's 1 limited practice, 2 full practices, bookending their practice reps like for this week with the same injury that had him knocked out like earlier in the season. So that is one thing. And then also, we were talking about what the game environment is going to be between them and the Giants. If we're assuming that this is in a game where without Malik Neighbors, without Motor, they're not going to be able to put up much of a fight. Do we see a scenario where the Seahawks get up big in like the first like 2-3 quarters, and then they start to switch in like a guy like Kenneth Walker, who already has like some general injury concern? Not to say it's going to happen. It's just I lean towards the projectable touches like for Kareem Hunt, but it's just, I would say just keep that in the back of your mind when you make that decision. But I think it's still Hunt by a good margin.
Okay, that is fair. What I would say is that yes, Charbonnet has the opportunity as a big home favorite of rotating in and maybe getting more usage than I would expect. But the Chiefs are also big home favorites.
Yes.
And so it feels like Kareem Hunt also has kind of like that same path to production, but even amplified more because presumably he's going to get the first bite of the apple there as the lead back. So
Yeah.
still go towards Kareem Hunt, but to your point, Charbonnet could see more production than you would anticipate simply as a function of game script and just positive overall environment as a big home favorite. And Kenneth Walker, even though he was not listed on the injury report at the end of the week as like questionable or anything like that, still dealing with that oblique injury. All right. Good morning from Tom. Tracy or Eckler? All right. So we've talked about both of these guys a little bit. Eckler coming back from the concussion. Brian Robinson not 100% healthy, so maybe we see a little more of Eckler in this game versus Tyrone Tracy, who presumably is going to get the first crack of being the lead back for the Giants now that Devin Singletary is out. I'm going towards Tyrone Tracy in this spot, but what do you think, Chris?
I would also go towards like Tyrone Tracy because again, like with Brian Robinson, like also appearing like he should be good to go. It's not like we're gonna have like Eckler already falls into like the RB, let's say 1B RB2 like type of role like for the Commanders. Whereas with Tyrone Tracy, like you can already see him at least being the 1A to start things off, and then we'll see where Turbo, like Motor and Turbo. I need better nicknames. Like honestly, like I need to find a better nickname like for myself, because those are just badass nicknames, man. And you're the Oracle, so it's like I need to find like another nickname. I need to get Nando. Like, can you guys like somebody like come up with a better nickname for me? But either way, like with the projectable touches, like for the Giants and what should be a back and forth matchup with the Seahawks, I think that's where I would probably like hang my hat on just the projectable floor of touches for Tyrone Tracy as compared to Eckler.
Yeah, I will say Motor and Turbo, those feel like Madden moves. You know what I mean? It's like you press a button and it's like, oh, this guy just went turbo. So those are good nicknames. All right, this is a question from Lori. Shout out Lori, our social media maven. Hi guys, start to Juwan Jennings, Jerry Jeudy, Dontayvion Wicks. Thank you, Dontayvion Wicks. Definitely starting him. It just feels like we talked about him earlier. Hopefully he brings me joy. And if I do not start him and he goes off, I will definitely have brought myself some sadness. So just from a risk aversion standpoint, I'm going with Dontayvion Wicks. After that, kind of nasty, Jerry Jeudy in a good matchup here going against the Commanders. Juwan Jennings, we have the 49ers as big home favorites. Juwan Jennings obviously had a great performance a couple of weeks ago, but now everyone is back in that offense, and it doesn't seem like he really needs to be the guy. So I would go with Jeudy, but it's just like by the slightest of margins. And I would say like it feels very much coin flippy.
Yeah, if they were, I would say the matchup is kind of the tiebreaker here for me, because if the Browns were going up against like pretty much anybody else, I'd be like, yeah, just give it to Juwan Jennings. I mean, like 20% of the team's targets, and that was in like Debo's like first game back. So I could see a scenario where that ticks down even a little bit more into like the high teens, like for a target share for Juwan Jennings. I think that feels about right. And then, but for Jeudy, did you see like him, like, I think it was like last week saying that he was getting fatigued or tired, like during the game, he needs to work on his conditioning.
Yes.
Not what you want to hear from a wide receiver, like just a month into the season.
It's like, hey man, that's what the off season is for.
Yeah. I would have thought those are things you were doing like, in June, July, not in September, October, but I'm not getting paid millions of dollars to do that type of thing. Either way, like with going up against the Commanders secondary, we know what types of matchups like that secondary offers, like for opposing wide receivers. And if he is like the wide receiver 2 on that matchup, I mean, all their pass catchers, like whether it's Amari Cooper, whether it's Elijah Moore, whether it's Jerry Jeudy, I think all of them at least have some level of viability for fantasy production. So that's where I would give the lean towards Jeudy like versus Juwan Jennings.
Yeah, agree. All right, Jets and Vikings 0-0 with 7:45 left in the first. Yes, baby. That is what we want. I
tailed that bet right before we got started too. After you said that, like I immediately pulled up sports.
All right. Apologies for when it doesn't work out. But if you look at our free bet tracker, all of my bets for week 5 are in there. I will probably add some player props in there. I've updated the player projections now that we have everything pretty much finalized in terms of who is in, who is out. And so now that I have those projections done after the show, I will probably go back in there. Nando is saying the over under live is still 40.5. Vikings just kicked a field goal. All right, 3-0. Let's keep that game low, everybody.
Yeah.
Let's give the positive vibes of negativity in that direction. All right. This is from Joe. Hello. How bad of an idea is it to bench Ayuk and play Wicks this week? My other two are Chase and Deontay. Great question here. I mean, I feel like very certain you are starting Chase and Deontay. Those guys are locked in, top 12-ish type of players. You would have thought something similar with Ayuk entering the season, that if you have him, you're just starting him. But again, this is the quintessential week 5 question. This guy that I invested serious draft capital in and who's done nothing for me versus this guy I got off of waivers and who's looked like a stud in the limited action that he has gotten. And I will say this might be a little bit vibes based. I'm kind of inclined to go with Dontayvion Wicks.
I'm also with you, and it's like the nerd in me wants to say Brandon Ayuk because it's like, look at the air yards, like look at the targets, look at all the numbers, like the pretty numbers that we look at on a week in and week out basis. But Wicks also has like those same numbers, bigger numbers in fact, or like, similar numbers like as compared to Ayuk, and also in I would say I wouldn't say a better matchup, but used in the parts in the field that are a bit more conducive, like to fantasy production, used inside and out, intermediate parts, deep. I mean, Ayuk is more of the static, like you just win as your prototypical X receiver where you play outside. You are the guy that the team is going to look at, like to create explosives, like down the field. You're going to win on efficiency. You're going to win on just like beating the guy that you're going up against. So I think in those like two scenarios, I lean towards like Wicks, who is going to be put in those advantageous like type of matchups, whether it's against linebackers, going across safeties and all of that in order to create. So yeah, I'm with you. I think Wicks is probably the better option of those two. But again, the nerd means like, no, air yards, like, those are the things that we should be looking at.
I mean, look, I would say this is the inflection point. This is the tipping point where it's like for one more week. I mean, I know I said like based on vibes, I'd want to go with Wicks. One more week, I would probably go with Ayuk. And if he does nothing, then whatever. It's not like I'm benching him for eternity, but
right.
Like, and this is reflected in my rankings. I have Ayuk as wide receiver 19, Wicks as wide receiver 20. They are right there. And like, there is a significant part of me that wants to put Wicks ahead of Ayuk, but I can't get there quite yet. It's like, hey, this guy who just got paid millions of dollars versus this guy who's the rotational player on his team. I have to go with Ayuk, but it is so close. And I would not fault anybody for going with Wicks. Wicks is like I'm taking a shot. Like I am seeking out risk and like we're going big or going home type of play. And there's something about that actually really appeals to me. And I wish I could kind of get there. All right. Flex. Should I start Madison or Sermon? All right. Madison coming in, no Zamir White this week for obviously for the Raiders, and then Trey Sermon, no Jonathan Taylor for the Colts. So we have this situation of like the battle of backups who have been elevated at least for 1 week to the starting role. Where are you on these two guys?
I'll go with our start sit tool on this one, because at least for like the funk that the Raiders are in with Devontae Adams, posting like Edgar Allan Poe memes and like all this other stuff going on. It's like, all right, man, like we know you don't want to be in like Vegas anymore. Like we get it. But for Madison, like he was already challenging Zamir White, like for touches, like prior to the groin injury for Zamir White. And not just like as a rusher. I mean, he was also getting like around like a 15% like targets per route run rate, like over the past like couple of weeks. So if we can see that dual threat like type of usage where we're just assuming Trey Sermon is going to get most of the carries, we don't really have a sense of what that pass catching like work is going to be for him. So I will say from a PPR standpoint, I could give the lean like towards Madison just for that projectable role. Whereas with Trey Sermon, we're projecting that Joe Flacco is going to allow them to still move the ball up and down the field. We're projecting that this game situation is going to lend itself to most like all of the red zone touches like going to Trey Sermon. Like it all makes sense, but at least for like again from a workload standpoint, like Madison does have that like flourish type of that I would at least want out of my backup running back.
Yeah, I would probably go the opposite direction, but it's not like this. It's not a strong lean. I have Trey Sermon. Looking at our free rankings now at FantasyLife, I have Trey Sermon at RB20, Alexander Madison at RB23. So like very much in the same tier in that spot. That Denver defense has been on fire. And I know
point,
like week one, weren't great against the Seahawks, but the Seahawks offense has looked legit. But since then, I mean, they have been shutting opponents down. And with how blitz happy they have been, and then with Pat Surtain being able to shut down really one half of the field, it is just tough for offenses to get anything going. And that game, if you look at the FantasyLife odds page, that game has a total of 35.5, like the lowest on the slate. Between the Raiders and the Broncos, like that could just be a nasty slog of a game. And so if I can theoretically avoid any players in that matchup, I would kind of like to do so. But Sermon in a game that right now has a total of 45.5. So like that game has 10 more points projected in it for the Colts and the Jags versus the Raiders and the Broncos. So yeah, going with Trey Sermon there for me, but like it's not a slam dunk and it's relatively close. Okay. Let's see. Do we have any other questions that popped up here? Yes. From Disco Stew BC, Terry T or DJ Moore. Cheers. So congratulations on being in the, this is a pretty advantageous situation of getting to choose between these three. Terry McLaurin started the season in a very not good situation. 3.3 yards per target he had in weeks 1 and 2. Since then has broken out. Still very much a Terry McLaurin fan as the number one receiver for the guy who at this point is almost just like locked in de facto offensive rookie of the year, unless Jaden Daniels just falls on his face. So Terry McLaurin does stand out to me. T Higgins, number 2 receiver in his offense, even though it is an offense that, has definitely had its good moments, but tough matchup going against the Ravens defense. And then DJ Moore in the hashtag revenge game going against the Carolina Panthers. Bears favored by 4 in that spot. I'm these are all in the same tier for me. I'm probably going with McLaurin, but like I would want to look at my rankings just a little more to think about it. But I'm going McLaurin right now. Where are you going?
I would go probably like McLaurin, Moore, and then T. And then that's even with like my Bengals like homerism, because it was like there was like almost a concerted effort to get Higgins involved in their Week 4 matchup against the Panthers, like over 30% of the team's targets, where it was like let's get him his reps. It's almost like we're using this as like the preseason for in a sense, and like so he can get in there, get back in sync with Joe Burrow. And whatever, but also getting like end zone targets, or like they almost came down with one or two, like if I'm remembering correctly. So I get the want to start T, but we've got DJ Moore going against the Panthers secondary. We do know what his role is, like the unquestioned like wide receiver 1, like for Caleb Williams, and but Terry McLaurin also like with Jaden Daniels. I think that McLaurin is probably the easier one to start, just given the downfield nature of the Commanders' passing game over the past couple of weeks, and with like the Browns' defensive front being somewhat banged up. I mean, there is a chance that this is a way that they can work not just the deep parts of the field, but the short and intermediate parts of the field, because Terry McLaurin was running those routes in like weeks 1 and 2 when Jaden Daniels was using his putter versus using his driver, like over the past couple of weeks. So I'm with like Terry McLaurin, like as a play, even though like going against the Browns, I get it. There's some concern, but I think Terry McLaurin's probably the better one to roster out of those three.
All right. So looking at my rankings, I have these guys all together. I have DJ Moore, 22, T Higgins, 24. And then I have like McLaurin, I think 25. I mean, this is, you know what? I'm changing. I'm going with DJ Moore. It's good vibes to be going with the guy in the hashtag revenge game going against his former team. And DJ Moore, like he's still someone I wrote up in Freeman's favorites, 34 targets, 2 carries in 4 games. Like eventually he's going to have a big performance. Coin flip situation between all 3 of these guys. I'm going to go with the good vibes pick and the guy going against his former team.
Nice.
All right. So for everyone who's just joining us, we're going through fantasy football questions. I'm Freedman. He's Chris Allen. Here we go. Oh yes.
What's in the
What is
mug?
in? What is in Freedman's mug? This beautiful honeycomb mug right here with the bee. Just absolutely wonderful work of art here. Akers, Sermon, or Tracy is a question from Justin Penkert. We've talked about Akers, Sermon, and Tracy at various points in the show. I don't think we've actually compared any of these guys to each other. Cam Akers as the fill-in for Joe Mixon and Dameon Pierce, Sermon as the fill-in for, I mean, this quintessential week 5 question. All of these guys like injury fill-in. Sermon is the fill-in for Jonathan Taylor, Tracy as the fill-in for the injured Devin Singletary. What are your thoughts between these three guys?
If I had to pick, let's see, ranking them, I'd probably go like Sermon, Tracy, and then Akers, just because we've seen like Akers have like that full-time type of role, like with Mixon like being out now multiple weeks, and Akers inefficiency, and also he lost a fumble like in the when he came in for Mixon like in relief like before like he's been gone for the past couple of weeks. So I would say like that's like my general concern for Akers. So I'd put him at the back end. And then looking at the other two, Trey Sermon, we've already talked about like how he can take over that red zone role like for Jonathan Taylor, and also with no Anthony Richardson, we can project those green zone touches that you would want for your running back. That's where I put him up top. Whereas with Tracy, we don't know like what that split is going to look like. We don't know like what that, and also how that offense is going to look without Malik Neighbors and Singletary not being in there. So I'd say that would probably be the tiebreaker between those guys. So again, for me, Sermon, Tracy, and then Akers like shortly after that.
Yeah, agreed. Looking at my rankings, I have Sermon RB20, Tracy RB24, Akers RB28. So, not like a massively strong lean towards Sermon, but that is certainly where I would be going in this spot. All right, next question here. Deontay or Wicks? Are we concerned about the Bears defense? Thanks, fellas. I mean, massive question here, because like every part of me wants to start Wicks in any possible spot where I can. But with what we've seen out of Deontay Johnson, with Andy Dalton as his quarterback for the past 2 weeks, it just feels impossible to bench him. You know what I mean? Like that dude has looked like an all-pro type of player. And now he's got, not that this matters at all, but he's got Andy Dalton in the hashtag revenge game going against the Bears. I would be going with Deontay, but the Bears defense, certainly one of the better units in the league. So I understand the question there, but Deontay Johnson, with the volume that he's been getting through the air with Dalton as his quarterback, that is where I'm going.
Yeah, and also like this is a revenge game for Andy Dalton too, because Dalton was also like on the Bears for a hot second. So like both him and DJ Moore going up against them playing them. Well, no, them going up against the Bears, like that allows like that type of, so it's like a double revenge. Is there like a turbo booster or something like that for revenge games? I didn't think that was a thing.
Yeah.
But with Deontay Johnson both playing like inside and out, like he also moves into the slot, and like so we've seen like Xavier Legette like play on the outside. So that he could be the one that will have to face like the Bears perimeter corners. I would say if there's a way that you could beat some of the Bears secondary, it might be like on the interior. So I'm not as concerned with Deontay Johnson. The thing is like, can that wide receiver earn targets? And we know that's a definite fact for Deontay. So I'm not as concerned about the Bears. They're going to find a way to get him the ball.
Yeah, agree with that. All right, standard scoring flex, Waddle or Madison? Again, a quintessential week 5 question of like if I had told you before the season started, Shades 721, hey man, at some point you're going to be thinking about benching Waddle and going with checking notes Alexander Madison, you would have been like, oh no, my season is going terribly.
Right.
Jalen Waddle versus Alexander Madison, no PPR format right here. I'm probably going towards Madison.
Yep, I'm also going towards Madison. Our start sit tool agrees with us. On that, just because we don't know how this Dolphins passing game is going to look. Like, I get your point earlier about wanting to start Devon Achane. Like, he has one of the highest target shares in from a running back perspective, in the league so far. And while most of his production has been inefficient, it's I would say at least starting Devon Achane makes sense. Jalen Waddle, mean, still primarily playing on the outside, not getting as many looks on the interior as Tyreek Hill. So not even getting like the layup targets that you would want, like when it's Skylar Thompson, Snoop Huntley, or whomever like playing in the game, like for the Dolphins, like under center. So I would take at least the projectable floor like from Alexander Mattison as of right now, versus trying to think of what this offense, like what Mike McDaniel can do with this offense without Tua being there.
All right. So we've just had Nando messaging Sam Darnold injured, Sam Darnold helmet back on, Sam Darnold back in the game. Thanks, Nando. Thank you.
Yes.
You were scaring me a little bit. That game still in the first quarter, 4 minutes left or so. Vikings still winning 3-0.
The Who am I executing? What happened?
It's the executioner. The executioner. That's an interesting one. We need to workshop. And I will say, people in the chat, if you have any potential nicknames for our guy here, throw them in there.
Crowdsourcing.
Yes,
bring it in.
Yeah,
bring it
no bad idea, as long as it is something that feels badass. You know what I mean? Like that is the requisite.
Yes.
All right. Should I trade Bijan for Mixon? This is a question that just like hurts my heart. I have a ticket on Bijan Robinson from the preseason 20-1 to be offensive rookie of the year. Not offensive rookie of the year, offensive player of the year. Basically can just burn that ticket right now. But that said, he's on the field. Mixon has been injured for the past few weeks. And like, even though like, I think always like, oh, this is the week that Mixon returns, it's not really looking all that positive. If you're looking at the injury report for the Texans, week in and week out, this week, Mixon was really like nowhere close. Like last week, he was at least, I think like doubtful when he was entering the week, and he got a limited practice on Friday. This week didn't practice at all. And it was just like out. So there's no way that I'm trading right now the guy who is young and presumably still ascending, who is in an offense that just had like 500 yards passing last week. So like presumably, I know like he's not going to get a lot of that passing yardage, but that could result in touchdown opportunities, goal line opportunities. No way I'm trading that guy for the dude who's like not quite 30, but like on the latter half of his career and is currently injured.
Right. And that's where like you could sell me on the idea of getting Mixon, just on the idea that, well, it's not like anybody else there is doing any better. Like we already noted like Cam Akers' inefficiencies. Dario Ogunbowale like has been more of like that 2-minute pass catching back, and even JJ Taylor has mixed in. And we already know what the team thinks about Dameon Pierce. So it's not like there's anybody fighting for touches or like actually going to challenge him for touches. No Zach Charbonnet, or like even with Bijan Robinson, he has Tyler Algier, like who's been like challenging him for work. But I'm with you, like with the Falcons offense, like really starting to click over these past couple of weeks, where we thought in the first 2 weeks it was Kirk Cousins is washed. The Achilles injury is really something that's going to be a problem. We're not getting the Rams South offense that we expected to get with Zach Robinson coming over from LA. Like all that we are starting to see over the last like couple of weeks. So I would rather take we'll even like, just to be for sake of argument, we'll say a running back in a timeshare on an ascending offense versus a hurt older running back that might get most of the workload when and if he returns. So I think at it, like if I just characterize those two situations that way, I'll still lean towards Bijan.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. This is a question from Kevin Sitwan. Sermon, Ramondre, Zach Moss, or Josh Downs. By the way, love the negative phrasing on this one. It's not like give me the three to start. It's like, which one of these dudes am I putting on my bench?
Yeah, which one's the worst?
Yeah, love it. So obviously, we've talked about Sermon, talked a little bit about Stevenson with the fumble issues, and his coach already saying like, hey, we might be making a change at running back. He's probably the one that I'm benching. Zach Moss, at least still the ostensible RB1, still working in, still getting goal line carries. Josh Downs with the switch to Joe Flacco, someone that I'm still very much interested in. So Stevenson out of those three, even though he looked great in weeks 1 and 2, Stevenson at this point is the guy that I would be looking to bench.
Yep, I'm with you there. Like even last week with everybody looking at Chase Brown as the guy that they wanted to have, and also with Brown, I mean, also getting most of the work, like once they got inside the 5, it was like back-to-back carries or something like that, like inside the 5 last week. I mean, Zach Moss like still got about 50% of the team's rushing attempts. We know this is going to be like a better like just scoring environment between the Bengals and the Ravens with the way we're projecting that particular matchup. I think out of all of them, I mean, the Stevenson rather, with his fumbling issues and the team looking at Antonio Gibson as like getting a higher workload in week 5, I would say he's probably the easiest one to sit out of that group.
Yes. Side note, Nando, I'm going to need you to stop putting messages in the admin chat back here. For people who don't see what's going on, Nando is giving me live updates about what's happening in the game. And he says, oh, Darnold pitches to Chandler. It bounces off Chandler. Jets just recovered a fumble. He's like, oh, the live over under is down to 38.5. Literally right as he types that, the Vikings score a touchdown and the live over under jumps up to 43. Nando, you're killing me, man. We got to stop. We got to stop with this. Okay. What is in Freedman's mug? Yes, this beautiful one of a kind honeycomb.
It will be a hot toddy at this rate if things continue to go as they are.
Will need to be a hot toddy. Yeah, right after we get off of the show, I'm going to be toddying it up for sure. All right, Heather Salerno, Jordan Love or Kyler, Daniels or Kyler. All right, so let's say that these are two different leagues that Heather is in. Where are you on Jordan? I'm just going to say both of these guys, Jordan Love and then Jaden Daniels, wrote up in Freeman's favorites. Those are the two I'm going with. Like, I can't imagine not starting Jaden Daniels in any league unless you have Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. So like Jaden Daniels like is automatic for me. And then I would say Jordan Love, absolutely love the matchup that he has this week going against the Rams. By the way, Matt LaFleur going against his former coworker and then former boss, Sean McVay. Matt LaFleur, 4-0 against the spread, 4-0 on the money line lifetime going against Sean McVay. So I love the matchup there that we have. So I would be going with Jordan Love. I'd be going with Jaden Daniels over Kyler Murray in both of those spots. And that's nothing against Murray. Just absolutely love Jaden Daniels and Jordan Love this week.
Yep, and our rankings reflect that. I mean, everybody has like either Jaden Daniels in tier 1 or Jordan Love at the top of tier 2, and for good reason. I mean, the number of air yards that like Love like put out like in his first game back. I mean, it was kind of telling that he showed up in that Brett Favre jersey and then just goes out and turns into like the quintessential gunslinger.
Yes.
Like, multiple touchdowns with multiple interceptions, just hucking the ball downfield. It didn't matter. Like he was like Brett Favre, like reincarnate. So I'm with you. Like while we're hoping to see more rushing and scrambling out of Kyler Murray, I think it's an easy call to say that Jaden Daniels, Jordan Love, like they should be like your starting quarterbacks for week 5.
Yeah. All right. Next question here from Football at Dark. Very nice. Tyrone Tracy or Antonio Gibson this week? Full PPR. Sorry for sending multiple times. I have to go soon and need to set my lineup. All right. Let's get this dude his information, Chris.
All right. I'm going to go with Antonio Gibson here. I like the fact that the Patriots like are kind of signaling that they want to make this trade. The Miami defense, like while it is like I would say kind of one of those like poor matchups we were talking about earlier, almost in the same vein of that Vegas Denver matchup that you were talking about earlier, wanting to stay away from. But if like Gibson can not only be used as a rusher but also as a potential pass catcher, Jacoby Brissett has just been rocked these past couple of weeks. I think he was like 13 quarterback hits just in week 4 alone. If they want to try and adjust their offense and at least get a guy that works in the short area of the field involved, and that would be Antonio Gibson's game, I lean a bit more towards him in full PPR, and that's why I'm giving him the slight edge like for this week. Just given the matchup, given how he could potentially be used in this matchup, and also again the potential flipping between him and Ramondre Stevenson.
Yeah, I mean, man, this is bad because we're splitting on this.
Oh man, we're not helping him.
It's the closest of splits. I have Tyrone Tracy as RB24, Antonio Gibson as RB25. But if you look across the board, all of the rankers have Tyrone Tracy just a little bit ahead of Gibson. Gibson playing in an environment with only 35.5 total. Just not a lot of points. And 1 point underdogs, just not a great situation. I'm probably going with Tyrone Tracy, but man, it's not like his game environment is really any better either. So
Mm-hmm.
I'd say it's a coin flip. I lean towards Tracy. Chris leans towards Antonio Gibson. We are sorry. We're sorry, my man. All right, next question here. Good morning. Good morning to you, Jennifer. All right, which three should I start, please, in PPR? Trey McBride, Dalton Kincaid, Trey Sermon, Rico Dowdle. Okay, man. I would say I'm going with McBride and Kincaid. I'm going with heavy formation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Going to establish myself, let the defense know that they're going to get beat all day by my big guys, and then going with Trey Sermon over Rico. But that's the way I'm looking at it. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, I think that's the easy call there. With Rico, we're kind of projecting like what his workload is going to be like, because Zeke is still there, still mixing in, and also like what is the team going to do once they get into the red zone? Is it going to be Jake Ferguson, CeeDee Lamb? I mean, like whomever, like after that. So I think like Sermon has the simplest path to getting like all of the touches that we would want from a rushing perspective, and then of course like Trey Sermon, Dalton Kincaid. I mean, with Dalton for Kincaid, without Khalil Shakir, we're seeing those targets condense around like Kincaid. So I think like either those two tight ends for sure, and then Trey Sermon, because I don't have any workload concerns like for him as compared to Rico Dowdle.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, the Cowboys with Rico Dowdle, that line has now started to pop to 3 at some places where the Steelers are now favored by a field goal at home. Just like very pessimistic sign for the Cowboys here. How do you guys need an RB for PPR? Robinson Jr. or Chuba Hubbard? Thanks for any help and keep up the great work. Thank you. TS, is that a B or
TSB?
TSB World? Thank you, TSB World. All right, Robinson versus Chuba. I'm probably going towards you know what? I'm going to need to think about this a little bit more. Chris, I'm going to kick it to you. My immediate instinct was Chuba, but I'm going to need to think about it a little bit more. What are your thoughts here?
And that was my initial lean as well. I mean, let's say if Brian Robinson was completely healthy, then I would lean more towards Brian Robinson.
Yeah.
Like, because at least from a workload standpoint, like he was getting like the touches inside of the 5, also being like lightly used in the passing game, like both of them were. I would say like from a utilization standpoint, they both like on paper like will grade out equally. But with this knee injury, with his knee injury for Robinson, I would give the lean like more towards Chuba Hubbard. Like a tough matchup against the Bears front. Like, don't get me wrong. I mean, but also you could say the same thing about like Robinson go up against Cleveland. But it's like, if I don't have any health concerns, I would lean towards Chuba.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Thinking about it more, it's a double situation here with Robinson. Even if he stays healthy in the game, could lose work to Austin Eckler because he's injured, and there's also a greater re-injury risk during the game because he's already entering the week questionable. With you going with Chuba there. All right, so presumably we're going to get the next question here on the board at some point. I mean, look, what I mean, Nando, what's going on? You're probably just watching. You're watching the London game.
Yeah,
just watching the London game here. All right, this is a question from K-Dog. Got 2 PPR flex spots and 1 free bench. Nando saying like, yeah, he was looking at the London game.
He's watching for an underbet.
Like okay. Look, I mean, we're all watching for that. All right. Aaron Rodgers, 2 interceptions. All right. That's good. That's good for the under. All right. 2 PPR flex spots, 1 free bench spot. Looking at Sutton, Hunt, Lockett, Tolbert, Slayton, Juju, Kurt. I mean, look, just everyone is there. Okay. I am starting out of this smorgasbord of options here. Kareem Hunt is sort of like the obvious one that I'm going with. He's got that projectable volume for sure at the position. After that, I just want to kind of throw my hands in the air and do like process of elimination. Like I'm not going with Wilson, not going with Samuel, not going with Gabe Davis. I do not want Tolbert. Slayton is intriguing to me as the guy who could potentially be the number 1 receiver, like long distance receiver. I mean, obviously Wanda Robinson is going to get the short stuff, but like we've seen Slayton when he's like the number 1 perimeter receiver on a team get decent volume and be able to do something with it in terms of efficiency. So I might go Hunt, Slayton, and then like, Juju. I don't want to go with Juju. So it's either like Lockett or Sutton. And I'm probably going with Sutton, as nasty as that feels, because at least like Sutton is still like the number one receiver on his team. And even when his quarterback has negative yardage, Sutton somehow still has positive yardage, which is like a real feat of mathematics in modern football. Lockett, like at this point, feels like the number three receiver now on his offense, with Jackson Smith and Jigba in that new offensive system getting more work. So I would go Hunt, I would go Slayton, and then Sutton is the guy that I would probably be carrying on my bench. But what are your thoughts here?
That's where I'm at. Like Sutton is like the easy like wide receiver one, and they're playing against the Raiders secondary, which we know can be beaten like from an air yard standpoint. So I'm there. Lockett, like less than or around 15% of the targets like in week 4, and that was in like more of an up tempo matchup like for the Seahawks last week against Detroit. So if that's like even in that back and forth like high scoring matchup, and Lockett, that was like he was kind of maxed out in terms of like looks like that week. I'm hard pressed to believe like in this matchup, in an environment where we're thinking there's going to be less passing because the team is going to be like well ahead of the Giants, that Lockett's going to see more work like in this game or produce more than he did last week. So yeah, I'm with you. We'll go with the projectable volume in Hunt and Sutton, and go from there.
By the way, just looking at this, I mean, look, anytime you bet an under, you are just scared of defensive touchdowns. And of course, defensive touchdown scored by the Vikings in the London game. I mean, look, I'm pacing to probably to lose. If you're looking at the live line right now, it is 43 in the London game. I bet the under 41.5. Look, no offensive touchdown has been scored in that game, and I'm projected to lose. That's how it is. This is how it is. All right, DJ Quill, good morning. Start to Wandell, Wicks, Shaheed, full PPR. That full PPR might end up mattering with Wandell Robinson, who is like one of the few players in the league to where it's like, what is the scoring format? Because that actually matters for this guy. Because like his depth of target is nothing. But especially now with Neighbors out, Wandell Robinson could like legitimately get like 10 targets without it being like something to where it's like, oh, this was something where they're just force feeding him. It's like that could just happen within the normal flow of that offense. And then we've talked about Wicks. We've talked about Shaheed. Oh man. I mean, I got to start Wicks, and then it comes down to Shaheed versus Wandell. I would say like, if you are looking for that like massive upside, I would probably go more with Shaheed. But if you're looking for like, give me a high PPR floor, I'm going with Wandell Robinson.
I think you laid it out perfectly. Because like, say if you went up against, I don't know, Darnell Mooney for some reason, like on Thursday night, or if you went up against Drake London, or any of the guys that went off on Thursday, and you need that punch on your roster, wholly go with like Rashid Shaheed. Like the Chiefs like secondary, they can be beat like down the field. Like Cincinnati got over them a couple of times with like Jermaine Burton. Jamar got like a couple looks like here and there down the field. Like, so it's possible for them to get beaten like from a deep ball standpoint. And that's where Shaheed rolls. But yeah, if you want to talk about like the ultimate like scam, like from a PPR standpoint, like that is Wandell Robinson, like just getting those like short area of the field, like targets, and then just like racking up fantasy points like left, right, and center. Like I know that doesn't Ian put out those tweets of like insert like a running back here grinding out 10 yards and getting 1 point, and then there's like Wandell Robinson just catching one like at the line of scrimmage. It's like, that's both worth the same amount for us.
Yeah, he's like just two dudes getting 0.9 PPR points.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so next statement here from K Quicks. I started Flacco over Rodgers. What are your thoughts? 12-man super flex, full
Good
PPR. I mean, look, Rodgers has already thrown 2 interceptions in this game going against that Brian Flores defense that is just leveling up based on what we saw last year. And I would say that if you had looked at our rankings, our free rankings over at FantasyLife, we would have had you on Flacco instead of Rodgers. So shout out us. Okay. Next question here coming up. Cooper or Ford? 2 guys on the same team here, Amari Cooper and then Jerome Ford. We are yet to talk about Jerome Ford on the show. And part of that is because there's nothing like especially sexy about what like Jerome Ford has been doing. And then also like the matchup isn't terrible against the Commanders. But if there is one part of that Commanders defense that is not absolute trash, it is the interior of that defensive line with Deron Payne and the other guys that they have there. That said, you kind of have to ask yourself, like, do you want the projectable volume of a running back, or do you want more of the upside with Amari Cooper and the volume that he's getting going against the number one, for wide receivers, pass defense in terms of like friendliness, like fantasy points allowed, fantasy boost allowed to wide receivers? Which one do you want? I'm probably going with Amari Cooper.
Yeah, from a vibe standpoint, like I think the Cooper play inspires joy. Where it's like, can you see like Jerome Ford like grinding out like 80 yards and a touchdown like against the Commanders? Like 100% that is in the range of outcomes. But could you also see Amari Cooper like going like over 100 and a touch like in this? Like that is also in the range of outcomes, like given this Commander secondary. So I would say that regardless of where you're at, like after Thursday, just given like the target share for Cooper, like that is where I would lean again, like in this matchup, even though I disagree with our tool. All right. I disagree with the start sit tool on this one.
Yeah. I mean, I have, looking at like PPR ranks and stuff like this and flex ranks, I do have Cooper ahead of Jerome Ford, not massively ahead of him, but a little bit ahead of him. And I would say actually, even though Ford has theoretically the higher like projectable floor, like I feel pretty certain like Cooper is getting at least 6 targets in this game, and like 10 is possible. I think like 8 is sort of like the realistic wheelhouse. Like I think he's had 8 every game this season. And then you look at Jerome Ford, like could you imagine a world where Jerome Ford gets overtaken in this game by someone else in the backfield? Like, I mean, I can.
Pierre Strong.
Yeah. Like I can imagine Jerome Ford is like at the end of the game, it's like, oh, hey, look, that guy got only like 5 carries and 2 targets. Like I think Cooper, like his projectable volume actually might be higher than Jerome Ford's potential. Like I think there's just more like downside risk of like if one of these guys gets only 1 touch in this game, like it feels like that could be Jerome Ford versus Amari Cooper. But I don't know. I love Cooper in general, and I love the matchup.
Yeah.
All right, double cask Chris as the potential nickname.
That. I don't mind that. Like all the bourbon bottles that I've got like surrounded me, like I don't mind that. I kind of like it.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you could lean into that.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Pick 2, half PPR, Javonte Williams, Rashid Shaheed, Mostert. All right, and we have 10 minutes left in the show. Maybe we will try to pick up the pace a little bit, but just as a side note, if I is Freedman, if he is Chris Allen, do not get to your fantasy football questions, go consult our free start sit tool. Go consult our free rankings on the site. We obviously want to get to as many of your questions as we can, but obviously we have the materials on site for you to consult as well. All right. Let's pull up the next question here. Pick 2, half PPR, Javonte Williams, Shaheed, Mostert. What are your thoughts here?
If I had to pick 2, I would probably go Javonte and Shaheed. I mean, for Mostert, I mean, it's good to have him like back in the lineup, but even still, like if we're going all the way back to week 1, just a third of the carries, around like an 8-9% target share. So he was like really like falling into the RB2, not even like 1A, 1B, like type of situation that they had like when it was like him and HN like healthy like last season. So if we're already seeing him take a step back, we saw the touches condensed like around Javonte Williams like last week. Tyler Bidet like put on IR. We already talked about the upside for Shaheed. I just think from projectable floor, I would rather take the touches for Javonte, the upside for Shaheed. Like I think that's where I land on those.
100% agree. Moving on to the next one. Thanks, guys. Our pleasure, Jordan. A lot of fun doing the show with you guys on Sunday morning. All right, half PPR, Olave, Higgins, or Deontay Johnson. We talked about Higgins before. We talked about Johnson. We haven't talked about Olave yet. Saints playing on Monday Night Football on the road against the Chiefs. Where are you leaning in this spot, Chris?
I would say Olave and Deontay Johnson. Those are the two, like ostensibly like the team's like wide receiver ones, like for both of them. And Higgins, like we talked earlier, still grades out as a wide receiver too. So I think that's the easiest way to go about evaluating the 3 of them. Despite the potential upside for Higgins, seen him get about 30% of the team's targets like just this past week against the Panthers. I know they're going to need him against the Ravens like today, but if we're just looking at projectable volume, Olave and Johnson have the simplest path or the easiest path to getting most of the targets for their team, where Higgins, he's going to be competing against Chase. We're going to see like usage for Andre Yoshivas like once they get into the red zone.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so there are all those other pieces of the Bengals offense that they have to consider like for Cincinnati.
Yeah. If I'm choosing between just one of these three, I'm going with Deontay Johnson. I mean, it would be hard for me to bench him. He's like clearly getting so much volume within that offense with Andy Dalton at quarterback. It's just like a leveling up for him. All right, full PPR, Wicks or Pittman. Ooh, like this one, we haven't talked about Pittman yet on the show. Pittman, who I think is in line for a pretty big boost, just given the switch from Anthony Richardson to Joe Flacco. I think all the pass catchers within that offense get a step up. And then, of course, Dontayvion Wicks stepping in for Christian Watson. And then now no Romeo Doubs either. And so Dontayvion Wicks could have a lot of volume also coming in his direction. Where are you on this one?
It's still Wicks. I know that we've got like Pittman, like they're both in the same tier, but I would say that Wicks has just like, not to say like the better matchup per se, but at least like the better path to targets now without like Romeo Doubs like in the lineup, and without Luke Musgrave in the lineup. Whereas like with Pittman, like we could still look at Josh Downs as a potential guy to use. And then of course once they get into the red zone, I mean, who's to say that they don't turn to Trey Sermon like to bang it in? So I think like Wicks with his upside, I would rather go like Dontayvion Wicks here. And that's just, I'm playing the vibes, I'm playing the matchup, I'm playing the usage. I mean, all that kind of lends it to like Wicks for this week.
Yeah. This feels a little bit similar to the Ayuk versus Wicks question that we had earlier, where for one more week, I'm probably going with the guy that I drafted earlier, especially now that he's getting what I think of as a significant quarterback upgrade with Joe Flacco. I will say, I am the highest. I'm looking at our rankings now. I'm the highest by far on Michael Pittman. I have him as my wide receiver 12. So I wouldn't say like I'm biased, but it's just like this is like a flag that I'm planting this week on Pittman. Like I think he has a good game. I think Josh Downs has a good game. I'm just very much into that Colts offense now that they have more of a pocket passer at quarterback. All right, question from Riley McBride: Brian Thomas Jr. or Jackson Smith and Jigba? I've been impressed with what we've seen out of Brian Thomas. Also impressed with what we've seen out of Jackson Smith and Jigba, kind of taking his game to a new level in his second season. That said, probably Brian Thomas is where I'm going. What about you?
Yeah, I'm the same. Like the Jackson Smith and Jigba is like the team's wide receiver too. It's been DK Metcalf like for the most part. Although if I'm remembering right, I thought like DK Metcalf like popped up on the injury report. He should be full go, but I thought he had like a limited practice at some point throughout this week, or maybe that was last week. But either way, like if I'm looking at the two in terms of like projectable volume, but then also like the way that they've been used so far, Brian Thomas being used like more downfield, JSN in the intermediate parts of the field. Like if we're looking just like who's has the better potential like to find the end zone and get in the box, I mean it has to be BTJ out of the two of them. And to your point earlier about the lines like starting to move a bit more towards the Jags, like maybe there is some like a sense of optimism as to if the Jaguars can get things going in their own 4-star.
All right, we've got a question here from Michael. Given the defensive matchups that these two teams are these two runners are facing, Alexander Madison or Zach Moss? Interesting. You got Moss rather going against the Ravens. You've got Madison going against the Broncos. Man, I need to think about this some more. I mean, that matchup against the Broncos is just so nasty given what they've been able to do defensively. And I just do not have a lot of faith in that Raiders offense. Zach Moss, still the top runner for the Bengals in a game that has a total of 48.5, one of the highest totals on the slate. But what are your thoughts here?
I guess if I had to split hairs, I mean, yeah, both have like terrible matchups, but like which of the two have the offense that can at least give them more shots on goal? And that's where I would lean towards the Bengals. But not just from their pass rate over expectation, but just their overall efficiency. I mean, for them being in this 1-3 hole, I mean, the Bengals offense have been like top 5 in EPA per play, like throughout the entirety of the season. So it's like, well, minus week 1, but still, like as of right now, they're seeing like top 5 in EPA per play. So like, which offense do you think could actually put Zach Moss or put their running back in a position to score? And like without Devontae Adams, I mean, like I can see like to me, it's easily like the Cincinnati Bengals. I could give Zach Moss that 5-yard touchdown or put him like at the 5, like with the chance for him to run it in. Whereas it's harder for me to see that type of scenario for Alexander Mattison.
Yeah, absolutely. I have Moss a couple of spots ahead in our rankings, so close, but lean towards Moss. All right, we need a mug answer. Nando has let me know. I will just say basic, very basic lemon tea. So close to the hot toddy. It's got the hot water, it's got the lemon, it's got the honey, just doesn't have any of the alcohol, at least not yet. All right, final question here. From Ken Varisco, half PPR, would you start Wicks over Pickens, Debo, or Deontay today, given the matchups? So looks like this is a start 3. Pickens, Debo, Deontay, the guys that he's thinking about, and then Wicks as the potential guy. Maybe he puts in over any of them. I gotta say, love all of those other guys. Pickens, Debo, Deontay, and especially I will say, with the Cowboys injury report, one thing that kind of snuck up that I don't know if many people noticed. Let me make sure I'm looking at the correct week. Trevon Diggs, the number 1 corner for the Cowboys, had an ankle injury pop up during the week. Full practice on Wednesday, limited on Thursday, did not practice on Friday, listed as questionable. And like that progression of full, limited, did not practice, most of the time that means that guy's not playing. And if Trevon Diggs is out, and they're already missing Deron Bland, and Kalen Carson as the fill-in cornerback, limited in practice all week, questionable, probably playing, but he's not that good anyway, and he's not healthy either. That just feels like a smash spot for George Pickens. At the same time, he's in an offense that might not want to throw the ball that much. So you kind of have to weigh these different things. I would probably put in Wicks over Pickens, but that is not a slam dunk, and I'd want to think about it just a little bit more. But final question here, Chris, where are you on these 4 guys? Are you putting Wicks over any of those other wide receivers?
Yeah, I would put Wicks over Pickens. I think is fine. The interesting part is like the Debo conversation and like how much is he going to get used? Because we were talking earlier about like what the outlook would be for Brandon Ayuk, and yes, the air yards are there, targets have been there, but it's still Debo being used essentially as the team's wide receiver 1B, and also getting like the touches out of the backfield. And so in what we think is going to be more of a productive matchup for the 49ers like this week, I would say that like Wicks and Debo are like I would go in that particular direction, with Pickens being like Pickens and Deontay kind of being like a slight cut below, just looking at their potential matchups and team environment.
All right. Awesome. Chris, this has been fantastic talking with you. Tell the people about the content that you do at Fantasy Life so that when they're done with the live stream, they can go check all of it out.
Yeah, you can go find me on if you have questions, you like feel free to hit me up on Twitter, like up until kickoff at Chris Allen FFWX. But also wide receiver cornerbacks matchups. So diving into a few of the guys that we can think from a offensive environment standpoint, but also defensive matchup, like kind of the guys I'm thinking who might be good plays or even bad plays that you want to avoid for week 5. Also, the injury report should be live, like up on FantasyLife.com right now. And also mailbag. Like if you have questions like about process, if you have questions about like outlook for the rest of the season, things that require a little bit more in-depth analysis or just thinking through things from that standpoint, I try and walk through all of that like on a weekly basis. So send me your questions. I'll be sure to try and answer them. So mailbag, wide receiver, cornerbacks, matchups column, and then also the injury report. So all that stuff you can find on FantasyLife.com.
Awesome stuff. I've got the positional breakdowns, aka Freedman's favorites, looking at my kind of favorite fantasy plays at each position for the week. I've also got on the betting side a best bets article, looking at sides, totals, money lines, the market, my favorite bets for the week, and then favorite player props for the week as well. And then this week, special piece looking at the futures market. Now that we are about a quarter of the way through the season, everyone be sure to check out that content. All right. We appreciate you joining us, and we hope that all of you end up not only winning the under in the London game, which we're back in the money. The live number for that is 37. We hope not only do you win that bet, but you have fantastic fantasy glory in this first of the bye weeks, and that may none of your players get injured, and may all of your players go absolutely off. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you next week.